Hi, it's me, Vicki Marie, and I just want to first of all say thank you to everyone for subscribing, for liking, for sharing the videos, for sending me emails suggesting cases, for engaging in the chat on my live shows, etc., and for being a member. Remember, Tuesday nights is members live only stream. For sending me a coffee, for sending me a super chat, super sticker, or super thanks, or for PayPaling me. I just want to thank everyone for the support that you give me. Okay, and this actually is relevant to this video. So recently I did a video on, in fact I've done a couple of videos on the relevance of DNA and how it's helped to catch cold cases, you know, like the serial killer Sunday with the Golden State Killer, who was caught with DNA evidence when he was well into his 70s and must have thought he'd gotten away with everything they did. We looked at some other cases, lesser known cases that have been solved by DNA. And in the USA. Anyway, so today I'm going to look at two other cases, and these are really special cases because these were not only suggested by, but relevant relatives, actual people known by two of my subscribers. And they're both cases in Scotland. One of these cases was in fact the very first time that DNA had been used in Scotland to solve a cold case. And you know, if you watch my videos regularly, you'll know that I always say there's always more victims, isn't there? Besides the actual victims themselves, the victims also are the families of the perpetrators, especially when they're completely. You'll see that in one of these cases I'm going to talk about tonight, the wife of the perpetrator, to be honest, is just as bad as him in my eyes, because she did lie for him and give him an alibi on two occasions, on two times that he'd actually murdered someone. And, you know, honestly, I just have to think to myself, why would anyone do that? We've all been in love. You know, I've been in love. But I just imagining that conversation where you know really that your partner wasn't with you, but they asked you to say that they were with you. And the person who's been murdered, one of the people that had been murdered, was a frail old lady that had been raped and murdered. You know, how do you even square that in your head? Now, there's probably some domestic violence going on there, probably. I don't know, but to me, I think, God, that's a way to bloody get away from him. Unfortunately, there was a big mistake made in that particular case because he was bailed, and he did. Anyway, I'll look into that when we get to that case, because the first one that I want to talk about is the case of John Doherty, or Doherty, and he killed a very young girl called Elaine Doyle. So this is the first one. And I want to look at this one first because this was the first time that DNA had been used in a cold case in Scotland. So let's have a look. I'm going to share the screen with you. Okay, so here he is. This is John Doherty. I think he was 51 when he was finally arrested. And this is the girl, the Greenock teenager Elaine Doyle, who he murdered 30 years ago. Now, he went on to join the army, get married, have children, I suppose. But he was finally convicted so he's from Dunoon, Argyll, and he was convicted in June 2014 and jailed for a minimum term of 21 years. It's not enough, is it? Again, you know, this girl lost her whole life. She was 16 years old. Do you know, I think what they should do is they should, when they're doing a life sentence, the minimum term they should take off at least, you know, this girl, she lost, let's say, if you think an average age that you might live is 75, 80. All those years she lost, that's what his sentence should have been. So if he was jailed for a minimum term of 21 years, he's been a good boy in prison, he'd be out very soon, because this was, hang on, no, not this one, it's the other one. So he was jailed in 2014, minimums. So that's, yeah, no, he's got quite a few years now, thank God. Still, it's got quite a few years. Anyway, he appealed against this minimum 21 years, and he was denied. So what happened? The body of 16-year-old Elaine was found in a lane close to her parents' flat in Greenock in 1986. So he was finally convicted in June 2014. So, you know, nearly 30 years later. Anyway, his DNA was identified on her body. Well, there was DNA collected from her body, and of course at the time there wasn't the DNA wasn't advanced as it is now, or as it was becoming in 2014. So the judge rejected his appeal. Scotland's senior judge, the Lord Justice General Lord Carlaway, said this was a compelling circumstantial case and the appeal against conviction is refused. This was a murder of an innocent 16-year-old girl making her way home along the public streets after a night out in central Greenock. It's a crime of rare callousness and brutality. As the trial judge records, it caused widespread public revulsion and anxiety and terrible anguish for the deceased family over many years. So yeah, all those years of not knowing what had happened to their daughter, their sister, you know, their family. Okay, so we've got a photo of him here as he was then. He's got the eyes, he's got the weirdy eyes, definitely. Anyway, although the judge went on to say, and this is him when he was arrested, and we're going to look at a clip of him, you know, being interrogated, and I think it's very telling. The clip is very telling, but anyway, we'll see that in a minute. So the judge went on to add, although the fact that the appellant was in his early 20s when he committed the crime and is now 51 is a matter to be taken into account. A significant punishment part was inevitable, notwithstanding the appellant's unblemished record since joining the army in the year after the crime. But you know, the thing is, he joined the army. Murderers quite often join the army. I'm sorry, but they do, because that's the way that they can, you know, become involved in violence. I find it difficult to believe that he went all those years without doing anything else, but it seems like he did. Anyway, the former soldier was arrested in 2012 following a cold case review and found guilty of murdering Elaine as she walked home from a disco in Greenock Celtic Supporters Club. So detectives arrested Doherty, I don't know if it's Doherty or Doherty, sorry if I'm saying it wrong, of Dunoon, Argyll after his DNA was found on sticky tape used in 1986 to lift hair and fibres off Elaine's body. I mean, you can imagine, thank God they did that. You can imagine them doing it. They won't have had the most high-tech equipment, but at least they did it. And the techniques required to match DNA were not available at the time of Elaine's death, but cold case detectives reviewed thousands of statements and they discovered that Doherty had not been questioned after the murder. So we've got your usual police shambles, unfortunately. When he was asked for a DNA sample, Doherty agreed and appeared stunned when he was later charged with Elaine's murder. During this trial, it emerged that Doherty, then 21, and a friend had been at Celtic Supporters Club while the friend was interviewed, and he named Doherty as being with him. Officers never approached him. So the ex-Royal Engineer who moved back to Greenock, after leaving the army, he was one of 722 potential suspects. I mean, that just shows it is difficult. It is a difficult job that the police have. He was finally tested in May 2012. So this is more or less the area. Elaine's body was found in a lane. This must be this lane up here. There she is, bless her. She'd been in on a night out, enjoying herself, as teenage girls should be able to do. So Doherty denied murder and did not give evidence in his defence. And his QC, Donald Finlay, branded the investigation as shambles after hearing that a blanket from a police car was draped over Elaine. He claimed the crime scene had been contaminated and the DNA evidence was not reliable. But that's the old chestnut, isn't it, with DNA? Oh, it's been contaminated, it's not reliable. But it came up with a match, which I think they go on to explain that, there was, even if it had been contaminated, it was just so ridiculously high that it had to be him. So anyway, the jury disagreed and found Doherty guilty. Now, I want to show you. So he's still in prison as far as I know. He will be because he's not served his minimum of 21 years. I just want to have a look at look at the way he's sitting here at his interrogation. So he's sat there, he's got his arms folded. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's horrible to be interrogated, even if you're innocent. But you'd be much more relaxed, wouldn't you? Because you'd know you had nothing to hide. He's got his arms folded. You can tell he's very tense.
What do you know about the murder of Elaine Doyle?
Nothing. Nothing other than what I've read.
Tell me what you've read.
Local newspapers.
So notice when he says, what do you know about the murder of Elaine Doyle? And he says, nothing, which he did shake his head, other than what I've read. And then he goes on to say, other than what I've read, but he's still shaking his head. So it's just not true, is it? Let's have another look.
Local newspapers, young girl, night out, murdered on the way home.
Yeah, and he does that little shoulder shrug right at the end that they say that people do when they're lying. It's not, just what I've read in the newspapers, etc. I mean, I know
what do you know about the murder of Elaine Doyle?
Nothing. Nothing other than what I've read.
Tell me what you've read.
What I've read?
Local newspapers, young girl, night out, murdered on the way home.
Yeah, so that's the case one. So his wife is the auntie of one of my subscribers. So as I say, I just want to say I do feel for her so much because, she wasn't aware. It just must be awful. I just can't imagine how that feels, to suddenly find out someone that you thought was a good and decent person, your husband, finding out that they're actually a murderer. Okay, so that's the first case. So that is John Doherty and Elaine Doyle. And he was caught. He was the first person in Scotland to be caught from a cold case, to be caught from DNA evidence. Okay, so the second one, this is, I found this one especially upsetting. Well, we've got the two extremes. We've got Elaine Doyle, she was vulnerable because she was so young. And then this lady that we're going to talk about now, Mary Lynch, she was a pensioner. She was vulnerable because she was so old. bless her. And this guy that murdered her, Richard Crawford, he preyed on vulnerable women. So let me just have a look. First of all, I want to show, I've got a picture of him. I could not find a photo, unfortunately, of the lady. I can't find his photo now. Right, there he is. Hang on. So, this is him. His name is Richard Crawford. Now, I don't know if he's still in prison or not, but anyway, the other thing that so both of these cases have got you know, legal sort of history attached to them. So the first one was the first cold case to be solved in Scotland, to be solved by DNA, and this one, because this guy, when he was arrested, he was bailed and he went on the run. He went on the run, but he finally did hand himself in. He was in Brighton, East Sussex, so far away from where he'd been released from. He was 41 at the time, and he had been jailed for the rape and murder of one pensioner and the attempted rape of another, but was released on bail after lodging an appeal. I mean, what? So he'd been jailed for the rape and murder of one pensioner and attempted rape of another, but was released on bail after lodging an appeal. Of course he was. Of course he was. Anyway, the only good thing about him absconding is that his appeal was just immediately quashed, and he will have to serve out the remainder of his sentence, which I will have a look at, whatever it is, but I bet it's not much. Anyway, he was taken directly to a police station in Paisley, Renfrewshire, on Thursday after arriving at Glasgow Airport, blah, 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 blah. So he was jailed for life in February 2000. Well, when they say life, how many years do they mean? They don't mean life, do they? For the murder and rape of Mary Lynch, 87. And then he was also ordered to serve 8 years for the attempted rape of a 79-year-old woman. And both these offences happened in the pensioners' homes, in their own homes, in the Fergusley Park area of the town in 1987. So he was released on bail pending appeal against his conviction. He arrived at court in Edinburgh for one hearing on the 12th of July, but he went missing before the case was called. So the 12th of July, when was he actually caught? 12th of July. So he was on the run for just over a month, really. Little over a month, maybe 5 or 6 weeks. Now, how this did, positive effect this did have, is it's led to the Scottish Tories were promising to seek a change in the law which would prevent those convicted of serious offences from being bailed. And they said they would change the law. Well, I hope they've gone ahead and done that. I don't know if any of you lot know, any of you that are in Scotland, maybe you know, because of course we have got slightly different laws. I just didn't even know that. I mean, it just didn't even occur to me that someone there who was convicted. Don't forget, he was convicted, so he's not just been bailed before he, you know, his case was heard or whatever. He'd been convicted. It was his appeal. Yeah, you know, sometimes I just don't think that value is put on life in Britain, is it? You know, if he would have robbed a bank or done something against the establishment, he probably would have got, you know, a harder sentence. Anyway, let's look at the actual story itself. So it's interesting because apparently what happened was, at the time, there was no facilities for storing DNA. And so his DNA was stored in a police bike shed until scientific advances meant it could be used as evidence. So this little old lady, he did what he did to this little old lady, Mary Lynch, at her home in Paisley on Christmas Eve, 1987. And it's especially horrible. I mean, if it can get any more horrible, because she had buried her son the day before, and the High Court in Glasgow heard how he ignored her pleas when she begged, "Please don't hurt me, I buried my son yesterday." So there was an outcry after it emerged that he could be free in just 8 years. Sentencing Crawford, Lord Easy made no recommendation on a minimum jail term. So most life sentences run for 12 years, 2/3 parole. Crawford, 38, will be eligible for release after only 8. Tory Justice spokesman Phil Galley said he would raise the case at the Scottish Parliament. Anyway, the other thing about this case that is awful is his wife actually, and his divorced wife, who was 36, claimed she was with him, or that he was with her when Mrs. Lynch was attacked. Wonder why she did that. But the jury, who actually were unaware that she'd also been his alibi when he was cleared of another murder 8 years ago, which was of a young man, they didn't believe her, thank goodness. Anyway, so he was found guilty behind that. I mean, you know, do you think she really did believe he was innocent, or do you know, anyway. So let me just tell you, this guy, he was convicted of trying to rape another widow, Mary Dorrans, who was 79 years old, in her nearby home. And she did not die, he did not murder her, but she died soon after the attack. He was cleared of a third charge of attempting to rape a 22-year-old woman, also in the same area. Why was he cleared of that? And he was found guilty of raping and murdering frail Mary Lynch at her home on Christmas Eve, 1987. So, you know, that lady, I think she was, let me just check, I think she was 89 or 79. Or, you know, these are the vulnerable people in our society. You know, women in general are more vulnerable than men. You know, that's just a fact that they are. And then you've got very young women or very old women. They're the most vulnerable. And to me, nothing is respected in our society unless it's producing, you know. So they don't care about old people because old people don't produce anymore. That poor woman, imagine what she went through. And what sort of a person is he? What sort of a man is he? Thinks he's a big man, does he? Thinks he's the big man, raping and murdering, you know, elderly women, frail elderly women. What sort of a man is he? You know, and what sort of a woman is his wife to give him an alibi when she knows he was not with her? I mean, I just don't get it. I understand she might have been scared of him. And, you know, initially, when it all came out, you'd be too scared, you know, say anything directly to him, but I would be straight down, then the police. Because the thing is, once he was found guilty, then you wouldn't have to, you know, face him anymore. And then another thing, of course, you could do is say you were going to say yes, he would. And then when it came to the court case, just say no. I said that because I was terrified. Say it in public, in front of everyone, where he can't do anything to you. If you are scared, do it that way. So, anyway. So, that's it. That's those two cases where DNA, you know, it's one of the best things, isn't it, that's happened in, you know, often people, oh, you know, things were better in the old days. Well, they weren't really better in the old days. Some things were. Some things are better now. And what's better now is DNA, you know, to help to catch these people who thought they'd got away with things. Oh, because he apparently, let me just find where it says it, where, yeah, he was full of himself, because when he was arrested and was told that his DNA matched samples at the murder scene, he just grinned and said, oh, I was tested 12 years ago and cleared. And he tried to he tried to deny that the DNA profile was his. And a US expert tried to rubbish the evidence. So she, God, for fuck's sake, what's wrong with these women? She had claimed Crawford's DNA sample should have been ruled out because it was stored in a police shed besides bicycles. But a Crown forensic scientist said the chances of anyone else having the same DNA as Crawford were 23 billion to 1. So, fuck you. Sorry, excuse my French, just makes me angry. I couldn't defend these people. I'm sorry. I know some people are convicted, you know, when really they're innocent. It happens. I know it does. It happens probably less now because of DNA. But, you know, when these, especially women, when they come out and start defending people that are clearly, you know, you just think, fuck off. You know, it's a double betrayal to me when a woman does it against another woman. These poor old ladies, you know, awful, 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 awful. But good, positive results in the end. At least they did not get away with it. The families have had some closure in just knowing who it is, because it's awful, isn't it, to just think all that time, well, who did it? Looking sideways at everybody because you just don't know who it is. So thank you to my 2 subscribers that told me about those 2 cases. I'm glad that your family had some resolution, and I'm sorry, especially in the first case, for the wife of the guy, because seems like she knew nothing about it, whereas I haven't got any sympathy for the wife of, or the ex-wife of this guy whatsoever. She'll get her karma, I'm afraid. They'll all get their karma in the end, even if they escape in this life. I genuinely believe they don't escape in the next, especially if they are not even sorry for what they've done. What can you do with someone who's not sorry? Okay, so thanks for watching as always, and remember to always live and love very, very carefully. Look after you, because you are the most important person. I'll see you really soon in the next video, and until then, now may your God go with you. Oh, I just want to apologize about my hair, but you know, the humidity at the moment, this is, some of you call it my Wurzel Gummidge look. I mean, I quite like it, to be honest. I don't care if I look like the Wurzel Gummidge. So thank you so much. Bye.